Back here on HQ, and it's a thankless job and one that Pete Prisco has been doing for CBS Sports every single week. And take a good look. This is his final power rankings. You got the Seahawks on top, fellow one-seed Broncos at 4, and just like the draft order, the Raiders coming in at number 32. We're going to use this version and compare it to week 1. But first, the top 3 tiers. Well, they look like this. 2 teams he considers Super Bowl bound, the Seahawks and the Patriots. You got 8 teams chasing a championship and 4 playoff teams, Chargers, Packers, Steelers, and Panthers. Before we get going, Pete, I got to point out here, first off, Leger, welcome to the party here. That is most important. Second most important, only 1 repeat division winner this year out of all the divisions, and that's the Eagles. So this was a crazy NFL season. So there's going to be some things you got wrong.
A lot.
And then a lot of things. And something that you called your by far biggest miss is the Seattle Seahawks. You had them at 22 to start the season, and they're number 1 for you. What changed?
Well, in large part, I didn't believe in that guy. I wanted to see it, and so I was a real skeptic going in, and he's proved that he's been better than I thought he would be. And so when you combine that with the defense and what they do and get after the quarterback, and that group has really come together up front, that's why. I had concerns about them. Offensively, the line was a concern as well, and they've kind of come together as well. So it was more about the offense than it was the defense, and they've answered the questions on offense.
Yeah, the funny thing is, Pete, I remember when we did the NFC West breakdown, I think me and you both had them as the last place team in that division, and Seahawks fans were at our necks. And I was just saying, man, this is a new offense. Clint Kubiak, yes, he worked with Sam Darnold and San Fran, but remember, Sam wasn't the starting quarterback. He was the backup. So this is really their first working relationship. I think there's going to be an acclimation period. I'm an idiot. I was wrong. Clint Kubiak and Sam Darnold have been a perfect pairing. And to Pete's point, I had questions about Sam Darnold, especially in those clutch scenarios. He's proven the last couple of weeks. Now, he didn't have to do much in the San Fran game. He kind of managed that game. But you go back and you look at the Indianapolis Colts game-winning drive. You look at the Rams game-winning drive. And I think that has boasted confidence in him for the Seahawks to make a real Super Bowl one. Little tidbit for you guys. Every time the Seahawks have been a number 1 seed, they've made it to the Super Bowl. So he has that pressure on him now because he has to continue that trend of getting to the Super Bowl as a number 1 seed.
It's hard to win there. It's hard to go into that building and win. I mean, they've lost some home games.
They've been better on the road this year, which is weird.
It's hard to win in Seattle, though, in the playoffs.
I was going to say, Mike Macdonald, 15-2 in his first 2 seasons away from Seattle, and then they get to the Super Bowl neutral site, but it would be a road game for the Seahawks. Let's get to the Broncos, which is the 1 seed. They get the bye. However, Pete Prisco, they're not the highest-rated AFC team for you. Why is that?
Well, I mean, look, they lost a couple weeks ago, and Jacksonville put a beating on them. And so when you get beat up like that, you drop down, and they've been dropped down. But look, they won the number 1 seed. They deserve the right to be the number 1 seed. But there are still questions about the Denver Broncos. And I said it earlier, I'm not convinced 100% that the offense is capable of going out and driving the ball down the field. They play short. And at some point, you got to throw the ball down the field. You see Bo Nix complete 20-something passes for 200 yards. That means you're not taking the shots. And I think for them to be a Super Bowl team in the playoffs, they have to start taking more shots down the field. Can they? Yeah. Will they? And hit them? That's another question.
Yeah, we saw they had a nice little streak before the Jacksonville loss where Bo Nix was pushing the ball down the field. I felt like Sean Payton has been a little bit conservative the last couple of weeks. Now, I don't know if he's doing that because he didn't want to show anything as they get ready to prepare for the playoffs. But to Pete's point, I heard you guys talking about the Denver Broncos defense earlier. That is the reason why they can be Super Bowl champs. They have one of the most suffocating defenses. When you look at all the metrics and top statistical categories on defense, they're top 2 in third down defense, top 2 in yardage given up, top 2 in red zone defense, and number 1 in sacks. And a neat stat that I found, Pete, when you look at 21 of the last 23 Super Bowl champions, right? The 21 people that won had a positive sack differential. They set an NFL record for sack differential this year. They're plus 45, which means Bo Nix doesn't get sacked a lot, and they sack the opposing quarterback a lot. So anytime you can protect the quarterback and get after the quarterback, you got a real opportunity. But to Pete's point, real concerns about their red zone offense. That has been the bugaboo for them. They're able to drive the ball in between the 20s, but for some odd reason, Sean Payton and that offense cannot get it together in the red zone. That has to change if they plan on going to the Super Bowl.
And when you combine the fact that they don't hit a lot of the big, they should be hitting more big shots down the field, then that means you drive the ball and you get into the red zone. And if you get in the red zone, you don't score touchdowns. That's a problem.
Yeah, and that Week 18 game, too, against a lot of Chargers backups did not make
count.
Broncos fans better.
I don't think Sean Payton, I don't think he game plan-wise was conservative.
It bothered some Denver fans
Yeah, I did.
to be like, come
It
on,
did.
punch it in. You're right
Yeah.
there. While we're talking defense, though, you have the Texans in at number 8, but I want to start with Leger here first because you think that this defense is good enough to take them all the way to the big game.
Literally, they could be a dark horse to win the Super Bowl based off this defense. And I heard Pete talk about this earlier. The offense is starting to come together, too. And you talked about it. C.J. Stroud can get hot. I think one of the most important things was Week 18, Nico Collins not playing, because it allowed C.J. Stroud to get some of those young receivers the ball down the field. And that builds confidence going on the road throughout the playoffs because they didn't win the division. They're going to have to start off on the road. So teams are going to ultimately try to take away Nico Collins. Some of those younger guys are going to have to step up. I thought it was big that C.J. Stroud started to get a rapport with some of these younger guys in the back half of the season. Woody Marks is starting to go in the run game. The offensive line is significantly better. But, of course, if they're able to win and go to a Super Bowl, the defense, which is the number one defense in football, will be the reason.
Look, the Jaguars and Texans, when we went into this season, we looked at those two teams, and a lot of people thought, oh, the AFC South isn't very good. These two might be the two hottest teams. They are the two hottest teams in the league.
Going into it, yeah.
I mean, one was on a 9-game win streak, and one's on an 8-game win streak, and the one who's on the 8-game win streak blew a 19-point lead in the fourth quarter to the one who's on a 9-game winning streak. So these two teams both are capable of going on runs, but they're also both capable of going one and done. Let's be real. And look, do I think that's going to happen? No, but they are both capable of having that happen.
All right, let's get to the champs who are trying to go back-to-back. And I think we've been waiting almost all season long to see last year's version of that championship roster. What are you thinking about Philadelphia entering this postseason, Pete?
That roster is gone, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. They haven't been close to the same team, in large part because the offensive line isn't the same offensive line. You look at this team, and the whole key to it last year was having the great offensive line. They didn't touch Barkley. He'd get through the line, he'd rip off long runs, and they were so dynamic on offense. Well, the offensive line won the same. You know, Mailata at left tackle wasn't close to playing to his level. The rest of the line was in and out of the lineup. You didn't have Lane Johnson.
Correct.
And all of a sudden, you can't run the ball consistently, and Jalen Hurts isn't the same player. The pass game concepts aren't creative. It's a very primitive pass game. And so when you look at it, combine all that, they haven't been very good on offense. They're really good on defense. And that defense can carry them. I'm one of those believers that thinks the Eagles are going to find the parts of their offense. It's not going to be the same offense. They're going to find parts of their offense in the postseason, and that defense is going to be suffocating.
And to that point, I know Emily was talking about it earlier. They're the only repeat division champ, but it took 20 years for that to happen in the NFC East, which is kind of funny.
And it took a lot of bad teams in the NFC East this year.
It also shows you the parity of the NFL this year. But to Pete's point, the defense is top tier, right? They actually might be a little bit better than they were last year, which is saying a lot because I thought that defense really suffocated people last year. Getting to the offense, I think Kevin Patula has to figure out how to get Saquon Barkley more involved. And that's not just handing him the ball. That's getting him the ball out of the backfield, too, because he's so explosive in the open field. You go back to that game versus the Buffalo Bills a couple of weeks ago, the offense looked good the first half, but they also ran the ball with Saquon. They refused to do it in the second half, which I just, for the life of me, could not understand it. So, like, if your offense is struggling, the easiest way to get back on track is run the ball. And then also, Jalen Hurts, people forget, last year when they made that run, he made a lot of big plays with his legs. For some odd reason, there's been no quarterback design runs. Maybe that changes throughout the playoffs because they know they have to go on a run. There's no reason to hold his skill set back.
You're just saving it up for the playoffs.
I hope so, because it's been bad on
It
offense.
might be, because it's been really bad. Think about it. The last time that the starting group played, the starting quarterback played, they didn't complete a pass in the second half. They haven't completed a pass since 2 weeks ago. Because they didn't play last week.
Absolutely wild. And this was your number 1 team in your week 1 power ranking. So down to number 10, I would say a disappointment. A team kind of hovering around that. You got the Steelers at 13. They were at 18, so you didn't necessarily expect them to be in the postseason. They are barely. Why do you think they made it here?
Well, I think the Ravens, with all their injuries, helped them a great deal.
Yeah.
They weren't very good. We all thought the Ravens were going to be really good. But the Steelers, look, the Steelers have tough guys, and at times they're going to show up. Guys like Watt and Hayward, and they're physical up front. And on the other side of the ball, you have Rodgers. And Rodgers hasn't been great this year, but he's been good at times. And in the postseason, Rodgers can get hot. You get Metcalf back. I think this is a team. I don't think they're going to go on a run in the playoffs, but I do think they're capable of pulling off an upset or two.
Yeah, they could potentially pull off an upset versus Texans, especially if that defense played to the standard it played last week. And that's my biggest concern going into this. T.J. Watt, a guy that dealt with a lung crazy scenario, you could tell he wasn't 100% healthy in that game. But Cam Hayward found the fountain of youth in that game. He was unblocked.
He's been great.
But my thing is, can they get up again right, after expending so much energy last week to get into the playoffs.
Well,
we talked about this
Mike
earlier.
Tomlin's a darn good coach, so if anybody can do it, he'll do it.
I'm just talking about their older players, because we talked about that the whole year. Remember when they had that Thursday night game, and I told you, Pete, I was like, that's a lot for an older team.
Yeah.
And they got boat raced because of the age of that team and not being able to recover. I thought Cam Hayward was unblockable, and he was sensational last week. Can he do it 2 weeks in a row? Because they're going to need that for him if they're going to pull off this upset versus the Houston Texans. You talked about Aaron Rodgers has so much experience in these scenarios. So anytime you have a guy that's a multi-time MVP, you got a legit shot. But I'm with Pete. I don't think they'd make a significant run to the playoffs, but they could win the wild card weekend.
Yeah.
See, there's 103 home dogs in the postseason, and so if the AFC has the Steelers and the AFC North, the NFC has the South and the Carolina Panthers, which Pete started at 27 for you. They climb all the way up to 14. I guess the question is what Dave Canales has done to unlock Bryce Young. I wouldn't say unleash Bryce Young.
I don't know if he's quite unlocked.
I
don't know if he's quite unlocked. Carolina Panther fans are angry.
Oh, they at your head.
That's why I characterize it a little bit more generously, unlocked rather unleashed.
He's been okay. There's no unlocking. There's no unleashing. There's nothing. He's just an okay quarterback. He makes plays. There were a couple games where he was outstanding. There were majority of games he was just a guy. And so I think to be better, they have to open it up more. He's going to have to, if they're going to have any chance to beat the Rams, he's going to have to put up big numbers. The last time they beat the Rams, he made some big plays on fourth down in that game. But they also turned the ball over. Matt Stafford turned the ball over three times, and one was a pick six. So I do think that is he better than he was a year ago? Yeah. Do I think he's the long-term answer for the Carolina Panthers? The answer to that question is no, and I'll stand by that.
Dave Canales has done a masterful job, right? Because a lot of people had, including Pete, and not just you, a lot of people had this team potentially picking top 5 again. But I remember I told you, Pete, I went to that training camp, and I was like, this is the first year I felt like they had the horses in the stable that could actually compete. And that goes to what they've done front office-wise. Dave Canales, the confidence that he's put into this team. And Bryce Young, people forget like what he went through his first year with that coaching staff. He had to literally be built up from the ground up. And even last year, he got benched, remember, Pete? So the mental fortitude this kid has gone through to put them in this position to win this division and have a home playoff game, it's a kudos to them. I think Dave Canales needs to be a little bit more inventive in this run game. I've been saying this for the last couple of weeks. We need 2 back sets. I think he needs to put Chuba Hubbard and Rico Dowdle in there at the same time because they have not been able to run the ball the last couple of weeks, and that's what's ailed them the last 2 weeks. I think if you do and look at the blueprint of what Atlanta has done when they have Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson in, I think if you do some of that, you could maybe catch the Rams off guard and get that run game going again. But to Pete's point earlier, you have to open it up. It's the playoffs. You have nothing to lose. Like, you are a severe underdog in this game. Let Bryce go out there and spin it like he did versus the Atlanta Falcons, like he did versus the LA Rams. Like, what do you have to lose?
I love it. I'm really looking forward to this matchup based on what we saw.
I think it's going to be a lot closer than people think it's going to be. I really feel like it's going to be a lot closer than people think. For some odd reason, Matt Stafford has struggled versus the NFC South on the road.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if Dave Canales hasn't unlocked anything, maybe the Rams have unlocked something in Bryce Young because that's the most points they scored in a game this season with 31. Our crew, NFL Today Plus, is continuing through the postseason. I just love how tall Kyle Long is that his head gets cut off in this shot.
Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. It just depends on the day.
I love it. We'll tune in to find out. Streaming every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern on HQ and P+.
I can't even remember the last time we waited this long to talk about the Kansas City Chiefs when it comes to Pete Prisco's power rankings. At least a decade out of the top 3 tiers. See where they landed coming up next. Welcome back to the show. Here's the customary 2 middle tiers of Prisco's power rankings. The I don't know, Jim! I don't know, Jim! 4 teams that were in the playoffs last year, and in the Jeff Fisher mid category. These 2 are like that Spider-Man meme of explosive offense and offensive defenses.
They really are.
Really are.
Too bad they're not. Neither one of them in the playoffs. They'd be fun to watch.
Too bad.
Yeah, no, too bad here. Back with Leger and Pete when we're talking about the Ravens, right? They came into the year Super Bowl favorites. Buffalo, and then we started to see what's happened to this team, which is blowing double-digit leads late, having all the tools to get it done, Pete, and in the end, they fell a kick short, but they're out of the postseason.
Well, a lot of things happen. When you look at their roster, they have stars, okay? Lamar Jackson's a star, Derrick Henry's a star. I mean, you look at this team, Linderbaum's one of the best centers in the league.
Yeah. Hamilton, so they've got individual pieces.
But the guys they drafted and counted on haven't really developed.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem. And they've been really good at that over the years. They would have a linebacker, and they'd let him leave, and then they'd put another one in, and he'd be just as good. Well, that didn't happen. Trenton Simpson hadn't played as well. These guys hadn't played as well. You saw a lot of guys go in the opposite direction, too. Marlon Humphrey, he's been terrible all year. Roquan Smith wasn't great this year.
Yeah.
And so when that happens, your team falls off. And then you had the quarterback injury. And when Lamar Jackson's not playing quarterback, that's a big problem. The other part of that is when he is playing quarterback, if he can't move like he's Lamar Jackson, he's not the same guy. And so you add it all up. The play calling was bad at times.
Yeah.
And then you start hearing rumblings and stories coming out of there that Lamar Jackson would stay up all night playing video games. Now, whether that's true or not, that was out there. It was put out. And Mike Preston, who wrote the story, he's been doing it for a long time. And he's not focused. And now you have talk of one of them, Harbaugh or Jackson, has to go because they don't really see eye to eye. Who knows? But the reality is this team was not close to being what we all thought it would be.
Yeah, this was my Super Bowl pick for this year, and it was because of what Pete said, so many frontline stars on this team that just didn't live up to the billing. I think we also have to talk about the injury bug, right? Lamar missed multiple games. Nnamdi Madubuike is a guy that we talked about, Pete. I don't think people understand how much not having him in the middle of that defense has really hurt this team as well. And for some odd reason, over the last couple of years, it's always something with the Ravens. Todd, but you talked about since 2008 how they've blown so many double-digit leads. You look at that Buffalo game, if that game goes in their favor, the Patriots game goes in their favor, maybe they're in the playoffs right now. And you can look at it at any certain year where the Zay Flowers fumble, right? You talk about Mark Andrews drop pass, right? Like there's always something that happens with them going back to the Kansas City game, not running the ball in the second half when you're the number one rushing offense and you're the number one seed and you have Mahomes at your house. So to Pete's point, this will be probably the most talked about subject this offseason when it comes to Lamar, because let's not forget, he has no more guaranteed money in his deal. And I know they were trying to maybe work out an extension this year, and it always seems to be something, some tiff between him and the team when it comes to an extension. Maybe he's a name that potentially does get moved, and maybe this iteration of this team, the window has closed because guys are starting to get older on this team.
It's funny. Think back to week one. Week one, at halftime of the Bills-Ravens game.
Boat racing them.
They're in the Super Bowl.
Facts.
That's a Super Bowl team. Guaranteed Super Bowl. That just tells you we have no earthly idea.
Derrick Henry's going to fumble a lot this season in key moments.
But then you get all the injuries and the age and everything.
Like I said, it's always something that happens. Always something that happens.
The craziest thing, though, is when they were 1-5, they were still like betting favorites to win the
AFC North.
Everyone thought they'd come back and do it.
Had they won at Pittsburgh, they would have won the AFC North.
Facts.
That's what's crazy. They were so close to actually winning that division. That's your Super Bowl pick. You had them as number 5, dropping down to 15 to end the season. Another team that you thought would be in the postseason, you preseason ranked them number 7, the Lions, to 16 after back-to-back 12-win seasons. Why was this not a playoff team?
Well, a variety of reasons. One, the injuries in the secondary just crippled the defense. And, when you have one star pass rusher and nobody else on the other side, that becomes a problem when you can't rush the quarterback the way you need to because your secondary is just decimated by injuries. Then you look at the offensive line. I don't think they were as good on the offensive line this year. Frank Ragnow retired. That hurt them. Decker was, not the same player. Penei Sewell was really good. He just wasn't as good. And so I think you combine all of that, and that's the reason. And, oh, by the way, Dan Campbell might stop going for it on 4th down.
I was waiting for it.
Because had he not been as aggressive in certain situations, this might have been a playoff team.
Without a doubt. That's where I'm going to start at. I wonder if Dan Campbell reassesses what he did this season. I know he kind of talked about that after, remember, they lost that NFC Championship game to the San Francisco 49ers. He felt like he left his team down by being too aggressive and saying, this is who we are. But in certain scenarios, you have to take the points, right, depending on the flow of the game. I go look at the clock management from this last week, and it seemed like the Detroit Lions were trying to lose that game versus Chicago Bears. Like 2 minutes left. Why aren't you running the ball to make Chicago use the timeouts? And then Jared Goff throws it in a pile of like 6 defenders, and it gets picked up. Luckily for them, Caleb Williams has an intentional ground, and they get the ball back, and they kick the field goal to win the game. But there's just been some head-scratching moments. And I talked about this earlier, Pete. Remember when he took away the play-calling duties from John Morton? They were the number 2 ranked offense. Like, when you do that, there's a lot of pressure on you because there's only one spot higher when it comes to points per game. And I think they fell to 5. So, there were some scenarios where I felt like maybe he was a little bit too brash in making that decision because what message does that send to the rest of the coaching staff that you don't trust him, that you made that change, but we were the number 2 scoring offense in football when you did that?
The question becomes, is the window closed?
Right.
I mean, that's the question. And you remember when they lost that game to the 49ers?
Yeah.
And they said, "Oh, you'll be back," and they told him that.
And they got injured.
But do you remember what he said? He said, "We know how hard it is to get to this point. There's no guarantee you're going to get there." And the reality is they haven't. I mean, they haven't been the same team, and so there are questions about the Lions. Is the window closed? I don't necessarily believe it is, because I think there's some good football people in that building, and they can find guys to kind of replace what they had. But they aren't the same team, particularly on the offensive and defensive lines.
Yes. They got to get one more pass rusher for sure.
Yep.
And then when he took over play calling, Jameson Williams went up, but Jahmyr Gibbs went down, which to me, he's their best player on offense. They got to figure out how to get him how he was the first half of the season, because that's when they were winning games. When he wasn't efficient in the offense, that's when they struggled.
They give up a lot of sacks this year, too. That
Emily mentioned the back-to-back 12-win seasons, but you lose your coordinators to other jobs. Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, that certainly affected them to some extent, too. So we've got the bottom two tiers that we still need to tackle here. Down bad, you see a lot of the teams, a lot of them have made head coaching changes already. And then the dumpster fire with the Raiders at the end, and they had the top overall pick. But boy, can't even remember the last time we've seen the Chiefs down bad and down this far in the power rankings. Pete Prisco from week 1-3 to week 18-25.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I didn't see this coming at all. Not one bit. I thought it would be the same thing. Mahomes gets his receivers back. He's going to throw the ball. They're going to have deep speed. The offensive line will be better. And none of that happened. It just wasn't the same team. And I think this might be one of those cases where, like when Brady had that little, they had to change things and it was a different team, the late Super Bowls.
The second half.
That might be what happens here. Yeah. Because there's still talent on this team. And they still have Mahomes. Now, how is he coming back from the ACL? I bet he's going to be the same guy. He will be the same guy. I'm not worried about that. But offensive line, you still have the core guys. You have Simmons. He got hurt. That hurt them. Yeah. He's back. He'll be back in at left tackle. You got to find the right tackle. They got to redo the defense because there's some age creeping up there. They didn't rush the passer very well, and that's a concern. But I think this is going to be maybe 1 year of retool it, and then 2 years from now they'll be right back in the mix again.
Yeah, well, Pete knows this. I didn't pick them to win the AFC West. I felt like we were going to start seeing the trajectory go down. It's just because when you turned on the tape, like the question that we had, Pete, was like, what do they do well? And we've never had that question with the Kansas City Chiefs. There's always something that we could say, all right, they out-execute you, right? They're explosive on offense. They have a really good defense. We couldn't say that this year about this team at all. And to your point, I brought this up earlier, I thought Mahomes was pressing a little bit too much this year. Like he wasn't trusting the offensive system. And there was plays where guys were open. He was like, no, I'm going to make the play for us. And ultimately, it just didn't go well. You talked about it, the lack of pass rush. It struggled. And even when they blitzed, sometimes they weren't able to get to the quarterback, which hurts a young secondary as well. So it'll be interesting to see what Andy Reid, Big Red, does to revamp this team. To Pete's point, this could be like a little lull like Tom Brady had in between championships for the Chiefs.
By the way, the Rashee Rice suspension really impacted them early in the season. I mean, they were expecting.
They were counting on that.
Yeah, that really impacted them.
Yeah, and I know you're less concerned about Patrick Mahomes coming back from an ACL. I want to know what happens with the guy behind you right now, Pete. If that's a tough way to come back with. If Travis Kelce doesn't end up returning, I think that's something we're going to keep an eye on.
And I think he's going to wait to see what Patrick Mahomes does. I think if Mahomes is capable of playing the whole season, then maybe he makes a decision to play. If Patrick Mahomes can only play half a season and he's going to have an indication of what that will be, then maybe he doesn't play. If I'm Kelce, I might just take training camp. I might take
it all off
and then decide at the very end I'm going to play.
This is going to drag out.
Yeah, I would drag it out.
I think he's going to retire.
I kind of lean that way.
I don't think anybody would be surprised.
No.
I think if that ended up happening for him. Yeah.
No, but that will signal another maybe potential new age.
Well, you know how guys get away from it for a couple of weeks and they realize, I can still do this and I really miss this. I think maybe, you never know, he might want to play again.
Okay, something else we'll keep an eye on in this offseason. The Raiders. There's down bad, there's dumpster fire, and then pick your adjective, adverb of choice when describing the Raiders. Already making a move. Pete Carroll out after one season. What's the fix, Pete?
Well, the roster's really bad. I mean, you look across the board, it's the worst offensive line as I've ever seen in a long, long time. I mean, it was awful all year long. Now, Colt Miller wasn't there, so that's big. But
that hurts.
But the reality is you can't play with what they have and try and be a functioning offense. The quarterback was a major disappointment. They put their faith in him, and Geno Smith wasn't very good. Then you had injuries. Brock Bowers got hurt and in and out of the lineup. and he's the real legitimate weapon. They didn't develop the young receivers. They traded away Myers. You know, Genti got hit in the backfield more than any player in the league, and still was pretty productive. Is going to be a good player. Yeah. Then you go flip it to the other side. Max Crosby, madman. What else do they have? I mean, it's not a good defense, and so I think they have a complete rebuild there. The good news is, you're going to get a new coach. You're probably going to get a good new young defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, and you're going to have the number 1 overall pick. And the question becomes, if it's the number 1 overall pick, is it if Dante Moore comes out, or is it Fernando Mendoza? They're going to have a decision to make, and I think that's ultimately, you get that guy. If you get a guy, sustainable success comes to your organization. Yeah. Now, they had the number 1 overall pick once and drafted a guy, and his name was Jamarcus Russell, and he flopped, and that's why the Raiders were set back for all that time.
Yeah, if you take a guy number 1 overall, you got to make sure you have the subsequent pieces around him so he can have success. Now, the good thing for them, they have a lot of draft capital, and I think they have around $100 million to spend. So you look at what the Patriots did and how they were able to flip things around in 1 year. If you're able to bring in the right veterans to put around this young quarterback. Hard to flip
with the rookie quarterback.
It is.
Although Jaden Daniels did it.
Yeah, but that was him, though. He was a different guy, right? We saw what the Commanders were like with him not in the lineup this year. You talk about the offensive line, and a lot of people had concerns last year when they took Genti instead of an offensive lineman. Like, was that going to propel them to have success? And when you talked about it, Genti was hit in the backfield more than any other running back in the NFL. It wasn't just Colton Miller. Remember, Jackson Powers Johnson, their number 2 guy, he got hurt as well. So, like, major issues on that team. And when you look at it, GM John Spytek, he had some questionable decisions, right? The Jacoby Myers trade, right? Because look at what he's done in Jacksonville. He traded away 2 young corners that were on rookie deals. Both of those corners have actually played decently this year. And you didn't have replacements for those guys. You talked about it. It's Max Crosby and who else on defense. So nobody else on that defense scares you. So
now Porter's developed into he's going to be a decent corner.
I like Darian Porter a lot. He's going to be a pretty good guy.
You have some young guys you can develop, but they got a long way to go.
They're going to have to spend a lot of money this offseason.
And that rookie quarterback, he's going to be thrust into that spotlight right away, and whoever it is. And I think it'll be Mendoza. And so, look, he's one of those guys that doesn't seem fazed by any of that stuff. And so I think that'd be a perfect spot.
Especially in Vegas, for sure.
It's the bittersweet life of getting drafted number 1 overall, is you're probably not going to the best team.
I'll take it, though. I would take it.
No question.
I'd walk in there and I'd say, I'm turning this damn thing around, and in 5 years you're going to only be talking about the Raiders because of me. That's what I would say if I were him.
Okay. Well, there we have it. You just go ahead and just coach Fernando Mendoza then for the offseason. Get ready to go.
Life
Pete
coach.
Prisco. A lot of life lessons learned from Pete Prisco, Leger. We appreciate you guys walking us through the final NFL power rankings. Don't worry, though. These guys are not going anywhere because the season continues. We will get you up to date on everything that's happening in the world of sports right here on CBS Sports HQ. We stream free 24/7, so hit that QR code to download the CBS Sports app.